It was bandied around a lot in those days that this was kind of a good old boys group, just didn't work to gather people in. I used to lay awake at night wondering how we're going to make payroll. I mean, it was lean. And they sat me down and they said, young man, here are the weak spots and here are the things that we want to see changed.
Dr. David Turner, we're sitting here in the Turner Conference Room at IPA.
Big honor.
And as we're now celebrating the 50th anniversary of the association here at IPA, this is one of the things I've been most looking forward to, is to just make sure you and I had a little time to talk about the genesis of the association and some of the high points and maybe some of the not as high points and things that we've had to slog through either organizationally or as a profession and all of that. You know, you've got the unique experience of being able to kind of see things from the genesis of the association to kind of where we are right now.
I was a rookie principal the year the organization had its first fall conference.
Which was 1972,
That's 1972. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to say what year that was.
Well, no, I think people can figure that out pretty quick.
Yeah, that was right. 50 years ago.
You know, IPA formally was named into existence on November 19th of 1971. This is after years worth of work we got some pictures and stuff that are just out here in front of us, by this group of people, the Illinois Principals Coordinating Council, so a group of folks that spent several years talking about the association or the possibility of the association and bringing three organizations, an elementary, a middle school, and a high school into one. That was a pretty innovative concept because from what we gather, nobody else had attempted to do that with principal organizations.
Very first fall conference in Arlington Heights in 72, several states sent board members or their execs. They were curious to see what happens when you disband your existing associations and combine them into one. Mm-hmm. And that started a movement across the country that IPA was influential with.
Right.
And it was really facilitated by the vision of Bill Sullivan, who was the executive director of the Elementary Association. And he really saw the need. The principalship was starting to change in the late 60s. Schools were starting to change. The suburban schools were expanding very rapidly because of the baby boomers and all of those kinds of things. And there were a lot of things just in the history of the state and the country that drove the need for principals to have some help. And the small associations couldn't provide the help.
No capacity.
It's just like a lot of state associations, now don't have the capacity to provide the help for their principals, but the Ed Leaders Network provides the help for them. I mean, it was almost that same kind of concept. So everybody really kind of, like in the old West, checked their guns at the door, They checked their egos at the door for the coordinating council, and they sat down and they said, if we're really going to succeed in helping principals and having a strong association with some influence with the state policy and the legislature, we got to be bigger and better, and we're not going to do it as three little associations. And they put them together.
You talked to me stories about calling up state superintendent, who you happen to know personally at the time.
Bob Leininger. Bob Leininger. I really knew Bob on both a professional and a pretty personal level. And I got this job, and I thought, well, I can just go over and talk to Bob. We can get stuff done. And I went over and asked him, about some lobbying things, and he said, You guys haven't earned your stripes yet. He says, you guys don't do anything. He says, why would I want to include you in the large lobby group when you've never shown up before when you had the chance? Yeah. I said, well, that's a good question, Bob. So there was something that we needed to work on. Initially, I had about 4-5 people who called me to a meeting, and they were people who were presidents and were going to be presidents of the association. And I think they'd had some conversations, but the conversations about what they wanted this outfit to become. Mm-hmm. And they sat me down and they said, young man, here are the weak spots, and here are the things that we want to see changed. And they were things like basically changing the image of the association to make it more professional. But it was bandied around a lot in those days that this was kind of a good old boys group, mm-hmm. just didn't work to gather mm-hmm. people in. Mm-hmm. And to enhance professional development, a lot more workshops, a lot more high quality workshops for principals, and a whole host of other things. And we sat in that room for the biggest part of a day and developed a plan, mm-hmm. Kind of a 1 and 5 year plan, if you will. Say, here's where we start, here's where we go, here's where we go. And it wasn't me, it was them. Yeah. Tom Howard was there, and Fred Singleton was there, and then they were followed by people like Phil Silsby and Dick Spohr, who were phenomenal leaders, and they were really vested in this organization.
I've heard you talk, especially during this process, about the influence of Marjorie Lohman, too, who was our mm-hmm. first female president of the association.
Marge was the president of the association that did the search when Jack Moomey announced that he was going to leave. And
who was the second executive director at
Who
IPA
was the second executive director after Bill Sullivan. Mm-hmm. And she conducted the search, and my name popped up, and here we are.
But she had been a part of the association for some time.
Oh, real long,
years,
right? Very long time, and very, very influential. But she was one of those real forward-looking people that saw some things about the association that she would like to change, but for a variety of reasons, change kind of came hard in some of those middle years, mm-hmm. and. She wanted someone to take the helm who would allow that change to happen and listen. And I was extraordinarily fortunate when I got the position of executive director that I had a string of presidents like that. You talk about people like John Orth. I can go back and I can give you things that exist today that they started. Yeah. They were, pure of heart here when they working for the association and improving the association. And that just made the job easier. And then, as those things started to take hold, it started to come around, and that was kind of the beginning of building the culture of the association as it has been enhanced since mm-hmm. then and exists today, where it really is a professional outfit and is very inclusive, and everything's high quality. Mm-hmm. It was really a very unique experience. Quite frankly, it was an exciting experience. It was really fun to be part of all of that and see what could be done. And it was fun to see how perceptions changed, how the perceptions of the universities changed mm-hmm. toward the association, the state board. Now, credit due back to Bill Sullivan. In the early days, Bill was very politically savvy. Yeah. He understood how things worked, and the network of people that he worked with in the early years assumed important positions at the state board, TRS, different places like that, and in the legislature. So he knew these people on a personal level, and he also understood how things worked. And he caused a lot of things to happen in the legislature. The principal recognition bill, for example.
Governor Ogilvie, right, from years ago.
That was Senate Bill 258. I can't remember the number exactly, but that was Bill's license plate for 2 or 3 years. I mean, he just did stuff like that. He was really smart. And after Bill left, that all just kind of dropped off for a while, mm-hmm. and we just kind of became a non-player. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that group of future presidents, when they sat me down, said, we want to be a player. Yeah. And here are the places we want to be involved in and viewed as an important player.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked out of there with a list, like a shopping list.
Well, yeah. So, Dave, as we, talk about just the history of things and, think some other people that come to mind, Larry Janes, Larry's pretty important to this association. You talk about the growth of workshops in the 90s, and of course somebody that cared a lot about kids and the profession and all of that, and also had a passion, particularly where legal work was concerned. Though he wasn't an attorney, he always prefaced everything with that, but knew the law about as well as
Anybody.
An attorney.
Yes, he did.
Larry was critical, and I was fortunate to know him and go to some of his stuff as well. But you know Larry a long
I've
time
been to some
before
of his stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, he can get a kick out of that too. But you've known Larry a long time here, and he was important IPA for sure.
Larry was important on a number of levels. He was a professor at Eastern and taught school law and a lot of other things in their Ed Leader program. And he did nearly all of the legal workshops. I really believe that there are a lot of people who came to the fall conference just because Larry was there.
Yeah.
And to catch up on things. And then he kind of instituted some publications that the association had and wrote an awful lot of columns in the Illinois Principal, and then when we started the small publication
Building
called
Leadership.
Larry wrote the very first issue.
Yeah.
He was one of our best authors and one of our most knowledgeable writers, and he was very influential, and he was just an interesting guy to be around because he was a real character. Went to the Air Force Academy and played football, and was good enough that he played with the Dallas Cowboys.
Right.
That he really never got to play in a game because he got busted up before that ever happened. But he was a hell of an athlete, and I could tell you more stories, but we won't.
There's a lot to absorb there.
It sure was. So that helped, and it really helped membership because Larry, at the drop of a hat, would go from the suburbs to Pope County to do a workshop or a seminar or whatever, and he'd always draw a crowd. And, we talk about growing membership. Well, it's kind of funny how you think some of those things happen, but I always credit Larry with that. One little Larry story. We're working on all kinds of stuff that we wanted to do, and we wanted to design a new logo. Larry came up with the idea with the 3 little interlocking rings for the 3 associations, and that's on the logo. Yep. That was Larry's idea.
Elementary, middle, secondary, right? Representing those 3.
Absolutely. That was Larry's idea.
I love that.
So,
and that's a legacy that'll hang around for a long time.
It's always going to be there.
That's right.
Yeah. I don't know how many people know that background story, but that was Larry's idea. Sometimes we grew pretty quickly in terms of membership,
right?
And especially in terms of workshops and things that we tried to provide for people. And I remember some of the staff, standing in my office and say, "We can't do this anymore," and the tears would start.
There's always a tough ebb and flow there. We still feel it today.
One of the ebb and flows, you talk about lean at the beginning. God, I used to lay awake at night wondering how we're going to make payroll.
Yeah.
I mean, it was lean, and then in a few years later, what we really tried to do, and this was hard for me, was to manage growth because, boy,
you want to grow.
I wanted to do some of this, but some of it you couldn't because you didn't have the capacity. So what we had to do was grow some, have a little more financial resources, and then we could hire another person or design something else, and then we'd get that working and generate a little more income, and then that's been going on forever. So now what do you got? 360 people who
I wish close to 30, but it's better than 4 or 5. I mean, it does. It does help you get some things done. That's what we started with. I mean, I had 3 women and me. Yeah, and that was the whole staff, and a dial-up internet service where you'd call Levi, Ray, and Schwoop on the phone every morning. But think about through the 90s, David. Some of the big things that members today might recognize. One is we went from our 9 region structure to our 21 region structure. That was significant because that aligned us with IASA, the Illinois Association of School Administrators, plus IASB, the Illinois Association of School Boards, which has definitely helped, I think, when you think about regional opportunities and just organizationally puts us in a tighter position. We expanded the field team. You had John Orth and Fred Singleton as two field directors, and of course over time we've had what we now call field service specialists, but the coordinators came on in 2005. Something else that pretty unique for State Principals Association is to have our own internal general counsel. Hiring Brian Schwartz back in the 90s as well. I mean, talk to us a little bit about that.
Oh, there are a million stories, but we when we started out, there was a lawyer who worked for the association on a contract. The very first important decision I made was to fire that guy because he quite frankly didn't do much, and we saw the need to hire an in-house attorney. But everybody had the perception that you hire an attorney, boy, you got to have a big time salary and stuff. And I sat down and told the board, I said, "This is state capital." I said, their lawyers waiting tables in this town. And I said, and at that time I said, an assistant district attorney in Sangamon County, the salary is less than a beginning school teacher.
Oh, my.
And it was. We had some really high-powered people apply. Yeah. And Brian, we hired him. And boy, you talk about a great hire.
That's right.
I mean, I've made a couple hires in my life, but that one was super. And he's become nationally known, as everybody knows, author and professor and this and that and the other, and just a good guy.
The creator of our online model student handbook service,
all of those kinds of things. But the other thing about him is, like a lot of the really good longtime employees here, and factoring some board members who've done multiple terms, really bought into what's going on here.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just a job. I mean, it was a kind of a mission, to make the place work and make the place better and help principals. I mean, really buy into helping those people who need, and boy, do they ever get some help.
Another person that comes to mind, David, that I think is worth mentioning, who would hate that she's even being brought up, is Jean Smith. And she was the association's very first professional development director. It became evident. You talk about those first meetings you had when you started. Well, the first one that I had was at the Doubletree in Bloomington with John and Fred, Julie, and Brian. And as part of that meeting, John and Fred notified me that they weren't wanting to continue to horsepower the professional development the way that they had been. What they recognized that I was not aware of yet, because I was just getting started, was that this thing needed to be shepherded by someone that could give their full attention
100% of
to
the
that.
time.
Yeah.
Correct.
And so, we were fortunate to have Jean apply. And when I think about where we are today with our use of technology to deliver professional learning, while we were already dabbling with like online administrator academies, I mentioned that before, she grabbed a hold of that and took us to a whole different level. She retired from IPA about 3 times because she was getting close to wanting to be like, I maybe need to step back. I said, Jean, I'll take 15 minutes a year if that's what you can give us. And so she started to back down from full-time into, 120, 160 days to 80 days, whatever, and has now finally here in 2021 fully hung it up. But, without Jean Smith, no online administrator academies, no on-demand administrator academies, no Ed Leaders Network, no micro-credentials. I mean, we just wouldn't be where we are right now without her. So I'm looking at another picture here, David, and someone that predates both of us in our positions, and is still here, is Pam Burdine.
Oh, yeah.
Now, according to Pam, she started at IPA when she was a kindergartner.
Well,
but
she was not much more than a teenager when I came, and she's been a steady hand all of these years, and has done a myriad of jobs, as time progressed, and the more things you load on Pam, the more she would do, and
Yep.
the more responsibility she would accept, and has become a key employee.
I think the thing that I appreciate most about her is just the deep caring that she has to take care of our members.
Yep.
Right? I mean, she deeply wants to make sure that they're okay and gets the service that they need, and really kind of has a do whatever it takes attitude with regards to that. You just hire good people and
Get out of the way.
give them the resources they need, and then just be like, tell me how it goes.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Right.
no harm, no foul. And, you
Yeah.
know, it's that willingness to, you know, take risks and being able to, I don't know, the term failing forward has kind of become cliche-ish anymore, but there's a little bit of that here too, is just being willing to roll the dice and see how things go in the spirit of ultimately doing what's best, you know, for our members.
I'm looking at a picture. It just popped up on
Yeah.
the table. And this is kind of a story that illustrates that cultural change that I talked about in the association during that time. I'm sitting here at a very fancy banquet table with Ed Hightower.
Right.
When I started, I would seek out somebody like Ed or anybody else around the state who was well known and influential.
Yeah.
When I left, and where you sit now, those people seek you out.
Right.
You don't have to go looking for them. They come looking for you. That's the change in the dynamic of the association that I think was so very important.